Hey, Professor, quick question before we get started. It's about one of the questions on for the homework from me last week. The A flat, you threw a C in there.
I'll go through it today, right?
Yeah, because like I didn't think there was a C in it.
No, you didn't. You sure it's not C minor?
Nah, it's A flat, B, and D. A flat diminished 11 would be A flat, B, D, F, but there's no C.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me just, as I said, I'll go through it, but hold on. Okay, so today is February the 8th, and this is the morning class of LNM 2, and we're doing triads. So today we will probably, depending on time, but most likely we will be doing 7 chords as well. So that's the new lesson. But I'll go through the previous homework side, and we're already warmed up a bit. So I wrote it off as A flat, but if it's A flat diminished, I have to look at the assignment. If it's A flat diminished, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it is. I meant to do A flat, but let's do it. So A flat. We can do it both in major and in diminished, right? So I think that would be to clear things up. A flat, okay. Actually, let me do this. A flat. Let's do the major first because that was certainly my intention. And then we will. So in major, so A flat major would be A flat, C, and E flat. I don't think anyone has a problem so far because this is basic sort of triad spelling, major third, minor third, okay? And inverted to first inversion, we would have C. Let me just take it down an octave because then I don't have to reach so far. We will have C and E flat. I'm just putting it down an octave and then A flat on top. So this would be A flat. This would be A flat over C. All right, and then I'll invert it to diminished. I mean, I read it out that at least I didn't intend to do that, but if that snuck in there, I apologize. So in 4 parts, that would look like this. We have A flat, say for instance here, it could be an octave up as well, and we put the chordal third on top. Like that, and we put the E flat in one of the inner voices, probably here, you know, and then we double the root of the chord, for instance, like this. You could also have the A flat up here and the E flat down there. But that's what it looks like in root position. So you have the root here, you have the chordal third up here. And then we invert everything. We do C down here, and we do the A flat here. So now these voices have exchanged their position, and then we simply just keep the inner voices like that. That's how it would be in the key of A flat major, which is what I intended. Now let's say I did A flat diminished. That would be quite easy to do that, but we can do that. Let's do it like this. Leave this aside because it will basically look the same, but we will have a good deal more flats to contend with. Because if I do A flat now diminished, that would be A flat, obviously, right? And then a minor third up from A flat would be C flat and not B. That's the common mistake that a lot of people make when they spell out chords, that they sort of look at the key and say, okay, that's the key I call B. But that's not spelled in thirds, and that really makes a difference when you're looking at staff notation like this, because here it's very easy to see what the bottom of that pile of thirds is. And if it's spelled correctly, then we will have no problem identifying what the root of the chord is. That's the sort of number one thing that we have to get. And here, a minor third up from C flat is E double flat. So that would be A flat diminished. And here, I will simply just adjust the same notes here and obviously the same here. So A flat, that would be fine. The E would be double flat and the C would be flat. Just out of curiosity, okay, do you have the same? Yeah. Do you have A flat diminished? Was that what I indeed wrote? Ms. Lopez.
I'm looking for it right now. I'm gonna just like pull it up.
Could you repeat the question, Professor? I'm sorry.
No,
You
I think
said-
it was
What did you ask, Professor? If I had a flat diminished?
did I or A flat diminished? Because I don't normally crank it up like this for the opening question. That's
When
the
I
question.
yeah, I have it. It's loading because I sent it to you, so the picture's not. It took. Oh, let me download it. Sorry, Professor.
I'm receiving it right now, and Angelica, all I'm interested in is just okay.
I'm trying to find where it was.
All right, let me look it up. It doesn't really matter because here it is as diminished, but that's not what I intended to do, so I apologize for that. Let me see. Yeah, it does say it's diminished. I'm looking at the original now.
Oh, A flat diminished. I have that, Professor. I have A flat diminished, and I have what you.
I do too. So that was a mistake on my part. The mistake was not the C flat or whatever, because here that squiggle meaning diminished. That was just a mistake. But it was my mistake. But Preach, you understand that it's not a B, right? Preach. Christian. Okay. Anyway.
Hi, Professor.
We'll move on. Yeah.
I was with Professor Green. He was correcting my homework.
It's fine. Let's not hold up the time. Yeah. It's good. No problem. Okay, B flat. Yeah. B flat. Let me start down here. So B flat would be a major third and a minor third. So B flat triad would be like that, and B flat in first inversion would be B flat over D. So D goes in here and like that. Okay. In four parts, here's my B flat. Third, the chordal third is the D, and then let's just change that. It doesn't really matter. We'll put the F in here and the B flat here. That would be B flat in root position. And in first inversion, it would look like this. Yes, here, like that. Okay. Everyone good? Angelica, do you have everything right so far?
Yeah, but I made a mistake, but I see what I did wrong. Instead of doubling the B flat, I doubled F. And I don't know why, but yeah, I see that.
And that's why we are doing it so many times, because there are many details that we can get wrong, such as doubling the wrong note, mistaking things or whatever, and not adding stems and whatever. You know, there are a million things that can go wrong so far. This is why. Okay, so this is why we are doing it over and over again. And I think many people make the mistake of thinking, oh, I can do it now. You know, if they got it right once, then they think they can do it right every time, and that's just not the case. But you will only find out when you're in the situation. That it's like practicing for a concert. And you think as soon as you get it right the first time, then you can play it right every time, and it just doesn't work like that. Okay, so once you know what to do, then the drilling starts. But that's the second example in B flat. F minor. That's like my F minor triad. In first inversion, it looks like this. And in fourth part, it looks like something like this. F, A. I'm just going to double the F here and put the C in there. Sorry. So A flat. So that would be F minor and F minor over A flat. So this would be the same thing, F minor over A flat, and four parts that would look like this. Just keep the inner voices here. That's not going to work. So here we can see that we're running out of space really, right? Because we need this to take place first, right? And then I have to double the F like that, for instance, because now I've doubled the root of the chord. That's important, yeah? Does anyone have a different voicing here? Does anyone have a different voicing?
For F flat
What
over
does
for F flat over A, for F minor over A flat, yeah. I have C5 and I don't know if can, and then I have the C that's in the right above B, and then I have F that as the last ledger line.
Let's do this professional style. This one here is A flat 3. Okay. Which one are you talking about first of all? You talking about this one here?
No,
Are you talking about this one?
no, I have the same one as the first one. I have the second one different.
Okay. How is it different?
So I don't
See?
your F in the treble clef, I don't have it there.
Okay, this is the soprano and the alto. So tell me which one you have differently. Which voice is different?
I don't have that there at all, if that makes sense. I have yeah, I don't know how to explain it, Professor.
Well, that's the problem, because we have to be able to explain ourselves, right? Otherwise, I mean, let's look at this in a professional way. You can't teach it. I sort of know what I'm doing, but I can't really explain it, right? That you can't get a job at that. So which voice is different? The alto and the soprano, the tenor, or the bass? Which one is different?
The alto and soprano.
Okay, so the alto and soprano are different. You have a different note because that will be a problem. Or do you have a different voicing?
A different voicing.
It's different. Okay, so you have the air pop here.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's not a problem. But you have the same voicing here, right? Or what?
Yes.
Okay. You see, technically speaking, you are inverting it, right? But you're just inverting in the wrong direction.
Okay.
Because they have to, yeah, you understand?
Yeah.
If you have the A flat up here, then I'll take it. You know, this is fine. If you have the A flat up here, then you're doing voice exchange. That's the crucial point that we're looking for right now. We're looking for the voice exchange, right? And here, if you put the C up here, that will be fine as well, right? You understand? That you can definitely put, let's say, let's do it the way that Angelica apparently has it, I think, like this, right? And then you would probably have the F up here, no? Or do you have the F down here? I mean, you can't really. Or have you done this?
Yeah.
Okay, this is fine. This works. I mean, it's a bit of a wonky thing to do. Now, what do you do here? You know, that's a problem, right? Because now you're creating well, parallel primes really, because you're moving in the same direction, two different voices, and this that's not a good voice leading, right? Because both voices are going in the same direction in the same interval at the same time. That's not a good thing to do. So you could do this, for instance. That would be a much better voice leading, because now the voices are independent. You've done the voice exchange, right? A flat to A flat, F to F. C is in the middle, that's the chord of fifth. And the double root just hovers there. So it's very, very pretty. You don't need to move anything, right? You see that? Okay. So this is why we're going through it, because I don't want to just say, no, you're right or you're wrong. I want to explain what the process is and why there's certain choices that are better than others, right? Because technically speaking, what you did here was not wrong as such. It's just that you can't move to this one without making a mistake, basically, a part writing mistake. Right? So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that you may risk that if you're doing enough of these kinds of mistakes that you would have to, when you go to grad school, or if you go to grad school or whatever, that you will have to do undergraduate theory again. That's our first line of defense, is that we're trying to learn this once and for all. These fundamentals are important, and they're not particularly hard to learn. I think there's certain principles that we learn right up front. You know, once you learn it right the first time, you don't need to unlearn it and learn something else in its place. Yeah. Okay. So that one works. I mean, you can definitely put it up here. I just put it down here because this is extremely high soprano, right? But we're not. I mean, given. I mean, you know that because you're a soprano. Given that we don't really have a context for this, that's not our first concern. I mean, we just want to get the dots right. I mean, the notes right. That's our first concern. All right, so far so good. Lauren, how about you? You're doing okay there? I can only see your head.
I'm correcting mine, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So that's the whole point here, is that instead of just receiving back a sheet of paper, I mean, electronically these days, doesn't matter, with a lot of red dots on it and some letter grade, this is how we're doing it, because this will teach us a lot more. It also teach, and in fact, the more times I do this, you know, I mean, I can already do it, but I learn something new about what kinds of mistakes that people actually make. Because they're the same mistakes as we all tend to make when we're not aware, right? I mean, I make mistakes too. For instance, the A flat diminished. I didn't mean to write that. I don't know what got into me. Maybe I meant A diminished. which is more, that's an easier chord to handle than A flat diminished because of the double flat. I mean, there's nothing really, but my point is that we all do make mistakes. In fact, it's not that we're all capable of making mistakes. We all do make mistakes, even if we know, you know, after the fact that, oh, I made a mistake, because that's just the way things work. Okay, F minor, G plus, so G augmented, yeah? Not a big deal, G, obviously, because that's what gives the chord the name. Major third up would be a B, so G to A, A to B, both are whole steps, so that's a major third. Now I'm gonna go a major third or 2 whole steps up from B. B to C sharp is a whole step. And therefore C sharp to D sharp is a whole step, and here is our G augmented triad. In first inversion, it involves the same notes, obviously, just in a different permutation. All I'm doing here is to put that one up on top, and therefore this one here is G augmented over B. So far, nobody should have a problem because this is basically sort of music fundamentals, chord spelling, and then the added thing that we did in the beginning of this semester was to write it out in 4 parts. B goes down here, for instance. You could actually also have it an octave up, or yeah, I think that's the best thing to do. Sorry, I'm going to start starting out the wrong way. So G here, right? G goes down here. The chordal third, B, let me just put that up here. And then the D sharp somewhere in the inner voices. I can put it here, for instance, is my D sharp. And that means that I'm doubling now the G. The root of the chord is your first choice of doubling. It's not always the way it is, but in this case, we're just learning the most basic way, the most common way of doing it, the way that's going to work most of the time. Okay, now we're inverting the outer voice. I'm going to put my B up here. So this is G augmented. G is still the root. We just have the chordal third on top, and we distribute the inner voices with a double root and the raised fifth, or the augmented fifth. So B goes in here, G goes here, and we can automatically double it because that's a good way to get a double root. I'm sorry. And particularly in first inversion, we want to make sure that we sort of don't double the wrong note. When chords are inverted, they become more unstable. So if instability or movement is your goal, then you have certain choices, and very often it is. But if you still want to be able to clearly tell what kind of chord it is, then double the root because that stabilizes the harmony. It all depends on the circumstances. We're sort of, we're learning this away from the real context in a way because we have to. There's no way that we can just jump straight into doing long progressions because, many students still have a problem identifying this is a D sharp and why is that a major third above B? Because it seems, B to C, we forget that that's a half step, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are many, many things that we still are hammering into place so that they don't break. That would be the answer to your fourth example for homework. Yeah.
I have a question. So like I understand the intervals and I understand like that to complete it you have to like move certain notes and it still has to be cohesive with the root and the third and everything like that. But so basically my question is, since there are different ways to do it, like there's different, like the example you gave is like the root is basically like the infrastructure of a house, and then you can put like the different wallpapers, which would be the different notes that you can possibly do. So my question is like, what are the rules that you have to abide by always? Like what can you not do? Because you can change the wallpaper and that's fine, but what has to be permanent?
I think for now, the exercise that we're doing is that we're inverting the outer voices. So we're getting those to behave in a particular way called voice exchange, right? Voice exchange. That's the immutable part, or the permanent part. I think you use the word permanent. That's the permanent part of the exercise right now. Well, whichever way the inner voices are distributed is a matter of context. Let's say, for instance, this D sharp here, right? We understand that it's D sharp because that's the way the chord is spelled, yeah? But we could argue whether the D sharp is down here and therefore it will be carried over here, you know? And we can also argue whether the choice of inner voices, for instance, let's say I put the D sharp here, right? And then I put the G here. Now what I've done is just to flip the inner voices, right? That's the wallpaper part of it. That's the, right? That's the decoration part of it. That whatever you have in the upper voices is arguably less important. It's not that, you know, it's not like, I think what I likened it to. So let me just complete this one here. So now that I've flipped them around, I will just keep this, right? I mean, for now, one of the sort of permanent part of what we're trying to learn is to write in an efficient way, meaning that change or move the voices, especially the inner voices, right? Move them as little as possible. Because first of all, it's easier to write that way. It's gonna really be a good companion for you when you're sitting these exams in various stages of your education, final exams or entry exams or whatever. When you're really nervous, this is not. I mean, you guys are not, by and large, aspiring music theorists. I mean, you want to go to school for performance. That's the way. I mean, here's the situation in most music schools. You have a class of music majors. Almost all of them in that class, in a music theory class, would be performance majors. You would only have, I mean, because if you are a music theory major, you have your own special classes that are a little more advanced because that's your field, right? But you have this situation where you have music classes where almost 100% of the students are performance majors. And those who are teaching, especially at prestigious institutions, almost 100% of those teaching these courses are not really performers. I mean, it doesn't mean that they can't play. It just means that that's not what they do. So most often, let's say, if you go to a famous grad school, you would have a music theorist or composer teaching these courses here. There's nothing wrong in what they're saying, but their observation would be different. What I'm teaching you is a set of tools that will work even if you're not spending all your time doing this. You see, tools that are easy to understand and that will really make you able to survive all these studies and hopefully learn a thing or two. I mean, but the thing is that my first order of business is to make sure that people don't have to retake any course that they've already taken and paid for. I mean, I can't ensure that because it depends on so many circumstances. I mean, it depends really, most of all on attendance, right? I mean, and I'm speaking to those who are in attendance. This is a very small class, I understand that. And there are certain people who are checking in later. I really don't have a problem with that, particularly these days. I think that's perfectly fine. So my point is that these may be crude tools. They may be simple tools. They may not be absolutely, in the end, the correct tool for the job. This may be just a hammer and a screwdriver method, but it works. Because I come from the same background as most of you. I'm a performer. I became interested in this because it proved to be my most important tool of performance in a way, or for studying and for teaching and doing all the things that I do. because I've not going to be about me, but I'm just using myself as an example here. Frankly, I was a little tired of taking lessons with people who would say, this is the way I do it. And then I might have said, why are you doing it that way? Could it be done this way? Yeah, but this is the way I do it, and that's the only way I know. And I can't really explain why I'm doing it this way. That's just the way I do it. Or if you have somebody who's really famous, this is the way things are done. No explanation, nothing like that, no dialogue. There was no really discussion of the musical material as such. It was just handed down my opinion about certain things, not because there was a reason behind it, but just because that was that person's opinion. That, in the end, wasn't good enough for me, right? You see, so I wanted to know more about the music itself so I could make my own determinations. And when my students were asking me, why are you doing it this way? I wanted to be able to explain why I was doing it this way. That was just a sort of, you know, a personal satisfaction for me that I could go into a dialogue about these things. And a student might say, well, I do it this way. Is that wrong? And I was able to say, no, this is actually a very good way. It's not my way, but it's a very good way of doing it because blah, 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 this note moves here or whatever, or the expectation. That's something that we're going to talk about at the end of the lesson today. We have certain expectations when we hear certain notes. We have certain expectations of how those notes are going to behave. Are they going to move? And if so, are they going to move up or down? Now that's kind of ear training. That's what you're drilling in ear training as well. That we have certain expectations. It's not just, you know, I know it's a big discussion in a way. Is that because we've heard it done a certain way many times, or is it because there is some energy inherent in notes that we can endeavor to understand? Is that part of music theory? Or is that just because somebody says, I think it moves down, this note moves down, and that's the end of that? I mean, it's like if you put a match to a bowl of water, nothing is going to happen because it's not combustible. That's not something that I've decided, and that's my opinion, that water is not combustible. I mean, in certain circumstances, water will behave differently, but what's coming out of your tap, right, is not combustible. And therefore, if you put a match to that, nothing is going to happen other than if water goes on the match, that's going to extinguish the flame. But if you put a match to a flammable liquid, such as gasoline, for instance, it's not just my opinion that things are going to happen very fast and they're going to spin out of control, etc. This is simply just because inherent in the material that we're studying, let's say you study molecular biology or physics or whatever, you can objectively argue that if you put a match near gasoline, it's going to explode or burn very fast, and if it's confined, it's going to explode, right? That's not an opinion. That's simply just a verifiable fact. And you can also, although it's more tenuous, because culture is mixed into this, right? If I play you a chord on my guitar, I could say that this chord here, it sounds pretty stable. It doesn't sound as stable as this one, but this one sounds pretty stable because all the notes are what we call consonant with one another. If I add another note to it, if I add this one here, it's not just my opinion that it sounds less stable, but I can hear that very, very, very lightly, I will go to this chord or something of that nature. If I have a complete non sequitur, these two don't sound like they're very related because they're not playing out of the same group of notes that we call the same scale or the same key, right? But this here, it sounds pretty good. Or if I can also have different choices, right? I can hear that these two chords are related somehow. I'm not really sure how they're related, but most people can sort of agree that the bottom note will tend to go up, and the top note will tend to go down. So, but could it be different? Could it be? Could I do that? I mean, in certain circumstances, I can get here, for instance. Let me do it with the root system. I can hear that these two notes here are tense because they're not really gelling very well. They are what we call dissonant. That's not to say that they're bad notes, but it's just to say that they are not really resting in and of themselves. Right? And that's a very likely outcome. But could I also make that? I could also maybe do that because there's an internal logic. Now I've reversed the energy, right? Yeah. That one is doing it 5-1. That's probably one of the things that you're running into the right by now. I'm just guessing. Right? And seeing the resolutions to this one. Or you can make it go to minor, right? But it's the same thing, but the direction is up for the bottom note and down to the top note. But if I reverse the direction, I can do that, and it sounds logical. And now I reverse the direction, but there's still an internal logic that most people can agree that these two chords are related, right? You see what I mean? Because the ear tells us that there's certain expectations that are fulfilled in a different direction compared to what we expected. Let's say you only have one outcome possible, right? I mean, you know, that they are just repeating the pattern over and over again. But here I've reversed the direction. Now I have two options, right? And now the ear is not really sure if that it expects outcome number one, outcome number two. Now there are two options, right? But we can agree, I think there's a consensus that both sound sort of logical because the voices in each chord are moving according to a set of expectations that are built into our cultural understanding. Does that make sense? It's a big discussion in a way. And these are not things, I mean, these are not issues that can be broken down and understood in just one lesson. If it was, music studies would be over and some people will probably have to think that you can just sort of look up a YouTube video and then you learn everything there is to learn about music. This takes time, right? Because we have to articulate what are the expectations of the ear and why, right? Yeah.
So like, I'm pretty sure for this example, you wrote out two different ways. So that one is like G augmented and then you put G augmented over B. So can you like play that so I can hear the difference?
Yeah, so I mean, so G augmented would basically be, here's your, there is your, and then here is a root system, right? And here is the first motion. But it's not, I mean, the important thing is not so much, and if you let's say, if you're learning these things, the outer voices, let's say here, they would still sound like good old G major, for instance, right? But it's all important is here's your, and in first motion. That's kind of what we're doing here, right? If you're inverting the outer voices so they're doing voice exchange, they will be doing that. The chord will still sound as a G augmented because that's what it is. Right? So now what we're learning here, we learn two things. I mean, the chord spelling is that you can do because that was part of LNM1. That's where we learned that. And unless you couldn't do it, you wouldn't go on to LNM2. And that's where we are right now. So now we're learning both. We're reinforcing the chord spelling, but we're also learning what's called voice leading. And that is basically that we are learning how to, first of all, control the outer voices, because that's the most important issue, right? We can hear that these two here, would be moving against each other with the same distance, right? And is it then, is it, sorry, here, is it now major, or is it, you see, already? That's actually a good progression, isn't it? Because there's certain expectations of chord momentum in that chord progression, right? Go ahead, Lauren.
So just to make sure I understood, so the outer voices are the soprano, and then the what is it, the lowest one? That's what you're referring to when you say outer voices?
Bass and soprano, exactly. Yep. You do understand that. That's very good. Yeah. Okay, moving on. It was not a useless discussion, actually, because I think hopefully what we will end up doing in the end of the lesson is to add a seventh to some of the triads, and that's exactly what I did, in fact, for your ears. So this is the primer of what is to happen on the other side of going through the homework assignment there. But if we don't get to that today, then we sort of prime the discussion for doing that the next time we meet. But I hope to be able to cover that today. Okay, so C diminished. C diminished. That will be C, a minor third up, and then a minor third up from C, from E flat would be G flat. So far, so good? Okay, so those are the note materials that we have to deal with here. E flat again, G flat, or this would, if you're jazzing, you just call that flat 5. You wouldn't really see that necessarily as a minor third up from E flat. I mean, it is, right? But you just call it flat 5 because that would be probably the easiest way to identify it. Chords for the flat 5 have a thing in common. They are unstable because the fifth is a sort of stabilizing force in any harmonic unit. It's basically doing the same as the root. It's reinforcing the root of the chord, or what we call the fundamentals of the harmony. Okay, so the fifth is doing the same as the root, and it's not really doing anything that the root is not doing just as well. So sometimes we have a choice, either to omit, meaning leave out the fifth, or or to include it. That's our choice, and very often the context will determine if we make one or the other choice. Okay, so C major, C diminished. That will be, and then E flat up here, for instance. It could be up here. I'll put the G flat here, and then I'll just add another root to it. So here we just double the root in the two lowest voices. That's a very, very common way to do it. And inverted, E flat, C. So now I've inverted the outer voice. Do that first, right? And you carry on or carry over the inner voices, because now, as I was alluding to before, by doing that, I'm learning, first of all, a tool that's going to be really good to know when we are talking exams, but it's also going to work for your choruses in your amateur chorus in your churches, because the inner voices, for instance, if you have a lot of repeated notes, then you don't necessarily need to be able to read music very well, right? You can simply do that. Very often the top part you have no control over, because that's where the melody is. The melody is whatever the melody is, right? And the bass part, also you want that to be a pretty accompaniment to the melody that you're setting for chorus, right? But the inner voices sort of function as the color of the chord or the spice in the dish, if you like. You know, and there's no particular reason to have them move around too much, at least not in the beginning. If you're writing, let's say later down the road, you have a professional chorus at your disposal, then you can start to really stretch out and learn certain things about writing voices where all the voices make sense, have integrity or artistic value in and of themselves. Very often you will find that the inner voices in a choral setting are not particularly interesting. They're there to sort of provide the color, or as I said, the spice of the dish. But they're not particularly interesting in and of themselves. If you, let's say, your viola player, for instance, in a symphony orchestra, you're not usually playing the most interesting melodies, but you're providing an absolutely crucial function because you are the meat and the sound of the chords upon which the melodies above it will soar, and the bass underneath would also have a very, very important role to play as a support for the whole thing. Okay, so that was C diminished. D plus. Okay, here is a bit of a sort of slightly evil chord, if you like. Okay. And I'm going to spell this one out. B is not a problem, right? So a major third up, so a B plus or B augmented would be a B and then 2 major thirds above it. I think we all understand that, right? Good. I see nodding heads and thumbs up, and we all understand that. So a major third up from B would be D sharp. Why is that? Well, B to C sharp is a whole step, C sharp to D sharp is a whole step, so that's a major third. Now, if I go a major third up from B sharp, I will end up on not F sharp, because
Would it
that's
be
a minor.
Professor, would it be F double sharp with 2 sharps?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was just about to explain that if you look at it this way, there's several ways of, I mean, if you're a keyboard player, you can simply just start on D sharp here, right? And then go 2 whole steps up. That's a half step, whole step, and then half step, whole step. So you will end up on the key.
Say that one more time, Professor? I'm sorry, you had me, then you lost me. You said up, up. So half step, whole step, and then whole step. What?
No, I mean 2 whole steps up from D sharp. Here's a half step, right? And here's another half step. So that's a whole step up from D sharp. It's actually E sharp, this one here, in this spelling. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 whole steps up from this one here. Here's a half step, here's a half step. So you'll end up on the key that we also call G, but it will be spelled F double sharp. Because if you look at it this way here, just do the alphabet thing. We would understand that a third up from D is some type of F. That's the correct spelling of it, right? You understand? So in terms of distance here, this will be, if we're starting on this one here, that one would be a half step up. This would be a whole step. You understand? And then if I go up to F sharp, this is still just a half step. I know it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. So I have to take that one off a notch, and that means F, not sharp sharp, but F X. That would be a major third off. So as I said, this one here is slightly evil, and that's why I know that I made a mistake. It was my mistake, but with the A flat diminished, because that's not what I want as the first. I want something easy, so people, when they start their homework assignment, they usually start in the left-hand corner. I want the first one to be relatively easy, right? But we understand that, and here is where the keyboard really is a good help. that you can see D sharp is this one here, right? Does that show? Yes, it does. Okay. So half step up from D sharp would be E, and another half step up would be F. So now we're one whole step up from D sharp. That would be this one here. And if I go a whole step up, that'll be the same as two half steps. Here's a half step, here's another half step. But it has to be spelled with F, because otherwise these two are not related by thirds. If I spell it out like this, you can see that this one here is some type of fourth, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I understand that sonically speaking, I mean, in terms of the way it sounds, it doesn't really matter if we call it F double sharp or we call it G. I understand that. But when you're stacking things up in thirds, it matters a great deal. The
Professor,
reason, yes.
I have a question about how you write it. When I wrote it, I put 2 sharps. Is it wrong? Should I put an X?
Yeah, I mean, there is, so sharp, sharp, or double sharp, that there is a sign for that.
Oh, okay.
Why there isn't a sign for 2 flats or double flat, I don't know. That's just it.
Okay.
I mean, I guess all languages have some sort of built-in, inherent, illogical reasons for whatever. And I can't explain this. There are a lot of things that I can't explain actually in the English language. I wish. And in music theory in general, for instance, well, actually, it doesn't matter. But if you have a chord like this, that is notated like this, very, very soon we'll get to use these numbers here. We most certainly identify from the bottom and up. And yet when we name this chord, we say 5, 6, 5, and I have no idea why that is, but we just do it that way. We don't need to worry about that now. But yes, the correct spelling, I mean, any musician would understand that if you put 2 sharps in front of the F, that it will be F double sharp. But there is a symbol for that. Now, let me just explain why jazz players particularly have such a hard time with this and say, this is rubbish, that's a G, that's a G. And in jazz notation, traditionally speaking, you have, let's say you have the lead melody called a het, right? I mean, the tune, you have that written out in notation. That'll be, just dots and squiggles and whatever, like this. And then you would have, a chordal accompaniment underneath it. I mean, there's several very, very, very good reasons for that. First of all, this is very easy to read, and you don't have to have a whole score, that you have to page to or whatever. Nowadays, that's not such a problem. We just have that. But still, it's difficult. When everything is written out in notation, it's difficult to orient yourself. Let's say you're playing in a big band. And let's say you're conducting a big band, like Duke Ellington's big band, or any kind of let's say pro jazz outfit like Jazz at Lincoln Center. When you're conducting that, you're conducting from a real score where everything's written out. There's room for improvisation, but most of the arrangements are written out. Trust me. They're not just sort of, you're just winging it, or you're just showing off and sort of inventing it on the spot. That's simply not the way it is. So the reason why jazz players have a hard time with that is that if I, for instance, write F double sharp to that one, it would be easier to read as a G natural, right? And if you have a single line, there is no particular reason to write that out as an F double sharp. Sometimes people insist on doing it, and then they feel very smart for it. But most active jazz players who are just playing jazz, not sort of professing jazz at a university, they're perfectly happy reading a G because that's the easier way to do it, right? And so all the arrangements are written out. So that's one reason that it's easy and you can get it down on one page. The other reason is that in jazz, there's inherently a lot more room for people's personality in terms of their voicing and all that. That's built into the understanding of what jazz really is. You know, it's not just to say that everyone now plays like Bill Evans because he's sort of the standard by which all other pianists are to be judged. I mean, that's not how classical music works either, by the way, but there is more of that. If you're playing a Beethoven sonata as a keyboard player, you're not just sort of making up your own notes because you like them better than what Louis actually wrote, right? I mean, you're playing a composition that is sort of more or less fixed in actually not as fixed as one might think. But nowadays, you're sort of, most pianists were playing, let's say, the Tototique Sonata or whatever name his publishers gave to these compositions. They're playing more or less the same notes, and they're playing them more or less in a similar way. You know, there can be variations in how you're phrasing it. There can also be variations in tempi to a certain extent, but you're playing more or less the same thing. That is not true of jazz. If you're playing Stella by Starlight, for instance, as a jazz outfit, Miles Davis's version would be completely different to Wynton Marsali's version, unless he's quoting Miles Davis, which is more and more what jazz has sort of turned into, almost like classical music, that we have a sort of canon of tunes or pieces, and people are paying respect to those who came before. Also because, you know, jazz is probably not the same living entity as it was in the 1950s. You know, your parents' generation had jazz as the hippest and latest new thing. You know, or probably your parents' parents, actually. but there was a time where jazz was different, and where those who participated in playing jazz was also co-creators of a future canon of repertoire that people sort of paid homage to. That's just the nature of things, you know. The same is true for Beethoven. You know, in Beethoven's time, I mean, we know this for a fact, for instance, that you cannot find any concert programs from the time of Beethoven where it sort of states, now Mr. Ludwig van Beethoven would play his newest composition, the hittest, latest thing called blah, 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 sonata. And the reason for that is that most probably improvised on the spot. And they were later on, or even during his time, written out as saying, this is the improvisation of that piece that I like best. Let's fix that and then sell it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with selling yourself, right? You have to make a living. But you understand, that was true for Beethoven. It's also true for us. You know, the fact that I'm getting paid to do this doesn't diminish its artistic value. It's just that, you know, that's the agreement that we have, that you learn this stuff from me, I get paid, and therefore I can send my daughter to school. Right? I can eat, you know, I can pay my student loans, et cetera, and you'll be in the same situation. So that's why that is called double job, because otherwise it wouldn't be stacked in thirds, basically. Because if I write it out as a G, we can see that there's a gap here. We can see that there's a gap, and very, very quickly, we haven't gotten there yet, but you will see that we identify an interval fourth as this one here being the root. And then you could say, in this case, it doesn't really matter, because a B augmented is also a G augmented, right? But that's true only for augmented chords and diminished chords, right? But the context will give it away that it's more proper to understand this in this setting here as a B augmented. We're sort of learning basic tools of the trade. I'm glad you're asking questions, but it is, you know, it is important that we understand that things are what they are for a reason. Okay, let me invert this one here. I'm just going to invert this down because I'm too lazy to stand up. So D sharp will go down here, and F double sharp will then appear here, and the B would then go up here. Okay, so that's our note material over D sharp. All right, written up in 4 parts. That will be B, and that will be D sharp up here, for instance. It could also be down here, I guess, you know. And then since we're sort of doing it properly, I can write out the F sharp here. Remember, please remember to spell these things, because otherwise you're not really sure which one is the. Let's say I chose to double the B up here, which is also an option, right? Then both are technically speaking within the range of each other of the alpha and the supremum. And until you add stems, you're not really sure which one is which, right? So that is just a good, again, it's a handy tool. It matters when you do things. Do them right away, put the stems on. And there's another thing that I want to point out here, because I see some of you are doing this. You're sort of filling in these notes here very nicely. Take a long time, so they're very nice and neat and whatever. That's going to take you a long time to do. It's going to take you even longer to erase. On a piece of paper, when you're sitting an entrance exam, you can burn a lot of minutes on just doing it that way. So just write, if there's no rhythm involved, which there typically really isn't, when you're doing chorale settings for exam, just write in half notes as your default note value. You won't see the value of that right now, but I can tell you, if you learn this as a habit, it's going to cost you. That's why it's good to have somebody who's actually done it. You know, who's done the whole dot, then from A to Z or whatever, and going back and then teaching the fundamentals, because that's what these things are learned, right? Okay, I'm inverting now the outer voices. That will be D sharp in this case, and here B, right? So we've inverted that. The easiest way to sort of get that. So I now need an F double sharp. I can put it down here. Why not? Like that. That will be one way. You can also put the F up here in the fourth octave. But these are the notes. Some variation on this is the correct answer to that assignment. Who's got everything right so far? Okay, but that proves that we are at the right level. But you understand, where we still have things to learn and we can still handle it. That's the skill I think that's hardest to learn is that. As a teacher, to learn how to make it still interesting and yet still manageable. If you're getting 100% all the time, then you're not learning really. I mean, you're learning that you can already do it and you're ready to move on, right? But that's very difficult. It's also very, very, very difficult in a class setting where you have many people of different abilities. Those abilities tend to merge or sort of even out as we go forward. Let's say in my Theory 4 class, most of the ones who survive that long are more or less, you know, they can handle the same issues, not at the same, some spend more time on it, that's for sure. I can see that some spent an awful long time, so they haven't perfected that technique, but they more or less can do the same thing. In the beginning, it's a little more uneven. You know, things are just a little more uneven in the earlier stages. That's to be expected. So it's actually, in fact, more difficult to teach the beginning class because you have to juggle all these different abilities, different things, and knowing that, you know, sadly or whatever, many of your students who are struggling, or not always actually, but I mean, many of your students are not going to be there next semester for whatever reason. I mean, some wise up and and say, nah, I want to be an accountant because that's a job that is much more sure to pay off. This is a difficult job, that's for sure. First, you have to learn a whole bunch of things that are very difficult to learn, and then you have to try to create a job for yourself. Both are difficult, really. All right. plus, okay, A diminished. Should we go on, or should we take another step forward, or should we just say we've done enough? Do we understand this? Okay, we understand it. I don't think there's a reason to do the remaining 4 examples, because they're really the same process as I've just done there, right? Is there any one particular example that you would like to do? Angelica?
I have a question, Professor. So while we were going through, I corrected like almost all of my examples, even the ones you didn't go over, just based on what you just did. So would I be able to resend it to you to see if it's correct now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So which one do you want me to do?
Can you go over C flat?
I knew that was going to come up, and I saw that the Preach also left that one blank. Don't be intimidated by stupid keys. I mean, it's my stupid key. There really isn't a key called C flat, right? I mean, occasionally we would find a C flat major triad. Sure, it's going to sound the same as a B flat major, but it's going to be spelled as C. We can certainly come across keys like that, keys that are not really keys as such, but we can have chords that represent a key that doesn't really exist, like F flat minor. I'm very fond of F flat minor because it doesn't exist. And the simple reason that it doesn't exist is that it would have 11 flats. Right? That's a pretty preposterous way of notating music. But you can have compositions where you know, in a flash moment of madness, you'll see an F flat minor triad. I mean, it will be the same as an E minor triad, which will be spelled, you know, in its key as E minor with 1 sharp, as opposed to 11 flats. And that's why we sort of translate these ridiculous keys to keys that are easier to navigate. So the same is the case with C flat. So C flat is just like C major. It's just that all the notes have been lowered by a half step. So if this is a C major triad, this is C flat major. So there really isn't anything to it. It's just sort of a trickery chord in a way, you know, and you say, okay, well, this is very, very difficult. So now that you have that mapped out, we always go back to basics. Or I do, you know, because I think that's the solid ground that when we are meeting a new challenge, we go back to what we are comfortable with. That's actually a human way of reacting to life in general, right? I mean, we do it all the time. We just not aware of it. We think we're moving forward, but in fact, what we're doing is that we're regressing to something we're comfortable with and that we recognize. So if I invert this, I have to have the same notes like that. And I've just inverted it. So this is now C flat over E flat. In 4 parts, it would look exactly the same as C major. Here's my, but it would just be spelled all with flats, you know. And then there you have the answer to the sort of question of what key would be, or what key signature would you have in C flat major? You would have 7 flats because it's basically all the notes in the scale. There are 7 different notes. They would all be lowered by a half step. But it will behave completely like C major, just a half step down. So C flat here, I'll put E flat up here. Why not? You know, because I can. And I would have G flat here, and I would have, for instance, C flat here. That would be one way of writing it up in what we call open position. You can also you can flip the inner voices, which means that the G will go down here and the C will go up here, and then you have a more closely spaced chord. That's all. It's all good. Now I invert the outer voices by kicking up the bass by a third, and you know, lowering the soprano by also a third, and I keep the inner voices like that. That's so. This is C flat major and C flat over E flat. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had gotten that, but I kept checking it over and over because I thought it was wrong because there was so many flats. But
I think let me okay. Let me cap it off here and say that we're not going to get to 7 today. That's fine. So we'll do that at the outset of our lesson on Monday. So we'll just start a new chapter. This one here, you can all fly on this one. Just going to say that the next time around, all we will do is to add, instead of having 2 roots in the chord, we'll just add a 7th to this chord, right? And we'll do the same thing here, and then we'll start to combine different chords, because that's the whole point of doing the inversion, by the way, is to get to a point where we can connect chords. Now we can do chord progressions, actually, and it's better to start in first inversion. So I want to say so that's what we got on Monday. This is fine. Let's just say that you all done the homework there. I don't think there's any particular reason to do any more homework of this kind there. Just take a chill pill for the week, and when we get back together on Monday, we'll take a new step forward, right? Because I think we're truly ready to do that. I think you understand the process really well. Let me say something about as a conclusion to this whole idea of double checking and then checking again and all that. That can become a habit. And it's a habit that's quite easy to understand in terms of education. I mean, first of all, you have to examine if you're doing this in other walks of life. Let's say if you leave your apartment and you're reasonably sure that you lock the front door, and you keep checking, you keep going back and making sure that you lock the door. You open it and you lock it again, and and you have to go back because, oh, did I turn off the stove, and did I switch off the faucet? Because there are any number of things that can go wrong. Did I turn off the heat? Did I, If this is a general pattern in your life, you may want to become aware of it. But in education, I firmly believe that we should feel free to make mistakes, right? We should move forward, because I know one of the enemies of learning music, let's say one of the enemies of learning how to sight read, if you make a mistake, let's say you've been taught that as soon as you make a mistake, you have to go back and undo that mistake by playing it right or by singing it right or whatever. And if you have coaches who are constantly stopping you because, no, that doesn't sound right, you have to do this, you have to do that, and now you get like 2 measures into a song. Let's say you're singing it and you still can't get the voice right and all that. That can become a huge problem, a monumental problem. I know this because I have teachers like that. You probably all at some point had a teacher like that. And that the greatest obstacle to learning how to sight read is, in fact, that people are going back and correcting that mistake. When you're sight reading, let's examine when are we sight reading? We're sight reading most often when we get together with people to just rehearse for the first time. It's not going to sound like roses, right, the first time. Not even close. And we have to have the ability to just make music without making it perfect. That's one of the reasons why I think it's such a great thing for people to like my daughter, for instance, she plays in a girl band in Brooklyn, where she plays bass. They just get together a couple of times a week, and they're not particularly concerned about whether they're playing everything. They're just sort of mucking about, and then they're deciding, okay, this is the tune now, right? This is how we're doing it, because we've tried it out 120 different times, different ways, and then we settle on a way that we're doing this, and we're doing it this way most of the time. There can be slight variations, right? But I think it's a really, really good thing to not be too concerned about making mistakes. And I think that's also true when we're doing homework, for instance. Why not just submit and say, oh, I can't believe it, there's flats for all the notes. But let me just hand it in and let the dude, the Dr. Dude, if you call me doctor, by the way, you have to follow it by dude, okay? That's what it brings me. You can call me professor, because that's apparently the way that the school has decided that we have to address each other. I address you by first name, you address me by Professor so-and-so. I don't get it, but that's, I didn't grow up here, so I don't get that. There's just one thing that I do not like at all. It's the doctor title, right? Because that, to me, creates a distance that I'm very, very uncomfortable with. I just want to let you know that. So my point is here, why don't you just hand it in and let the dude, me, sort out and tell you, let's say you did this. So what? I just, hey, you know, if you're in C flat, that means all the notes are flat compared to C major. But you have to have the guts to just hand in work that is not, that you think, this is what my gut instinct tells me. And I just want to get it out in the open here and not worry about whether Dr. Dude is going to downgrade me 0.67 of the grade point, because my brain just doesn't function like that. First of all, I don't know what 0.67 of grade point is. I understand that many music departments, and I'm not going to, you know, be particular. You know, I think inherent in all university departments, people are trying, and for sometimes for good reasons. They want to be fair, whatever. And so they're sort of weighing up how much would that count, for instance, as a reduction in your homework assignment? Or what if they wrote this note, which is technically, you know, sorry, it's the same pitch as the other one, spelled the wrong way. Would that be 0.67 or 0.65 compared to if the flat was missing? And all? I mean, you can run circles around yourself like that, and it's utter a waste of time. Do you understand? But that's just my opinion, and I know that many of my colleagues do not agree with me. They think that everything that is handed in has to be booked and has to be evaluated, and you have to get a D plus or a B minus or C or A or whatever these letter names are called, expressed as a letter grade and as a percentile. I mean, I think you could probably very quickly, and sometimes it's done for the right reason. Sometimes that we want to be fair to everyone. I get that, you know. I think that's sometimes what we tell each other. The stories we tell each other, they're not always true, you know. I mean, I think human beings are the only creature of God that can lie, and therefore we do it, right? And I think very often we are lying to ourselves. We are telling us a story that we would like to believe, but it's not actually true. We're just telling, you know, ourselves and each other the story because it sounds good. I would much rather get homework in that is wrong than not get homework in because people are afraid of getting a bad grade, or if they, I don't think this is right, but I'm just going to hand it in. I would much rather have that openness. You see? So that's the way my brain works, that I, you know, things that are handed in, things that are positive, meaning that you made an effort, even if it's wrong, we can deal with that. Right? The other stuff that we're trying to hide, yet as a student, I tried to hide all my life. You know, because I didn't want the professors to know that I didn't understand this. So I was hiding, sort of sitting down in the corner and sort of away from classes, even all the way through my doctoral degree. I hired tutors to help me out because I didn't really understand it. And I had to have a one-on-one situation where I could feel free because there's no grade involved, right? And et cetera, et cetera. So I had to have a forum, you know, a situation where I could actually really be honest and quote unquote naked, right? And be able to learn. And I want to try to create a classroom where people feel free to make mistakes, because I think it's a crucial part of learning. I really do. Okay, so so many were the words for me today. Okay, and I'll see you on Monday. Let's just forget about homework for next time. I think you're sitting. I mean, this class, you guys are sitting pretty well with this. Yeah. Even if you're making mistakes, right? I want you to understand that you can still understand it, even if the dots and squiggles are a little bit long still. We have time to learn this. We're actually, believe it or not, we're actually slightly ahead of schedule. Yeah, we've covered more things than I had thought that we would do at this point in time, which is good. So the fact that we don't need to run, you know, haphazardly forward without actually understanding everything, that's not such a bad thing. Just let it settle a little bit, right? and then next week we'll go forward. Okay? Cool. Have a good week, and I'll see you on Monday. All right, guys. Christian, you okay? Yeah?
Bye, Professor. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. See you later.
Professor,
Yeah.
Christina Lamberti, my vocal